This video is presented by newwoodworker.com. I know bridle joints can be a little intimidating, but if you take your time, watch what you're doing, and use the right tools, they're not that bad at all. One of the first things we need to find out is what the maximum blade height is that's safe on your saw. I can get a little more than 3 inches of blade above the table before I have to start worrying about blade washers or mounts hitting the bottom of the insert. I like to use thicker wood for the bridle portion of the joint because it gives me another shadow line that just makes this joint look better yet. The dados that accept the legs of the bridle joint are usually pretty shallow, so you want to set this right. Here I'm going to set it to about 3/16 of an inch. We don't want to take too much wood away from the center of the board that the bridle fits onto. Using a gauge block with my miter gauge lets me be sure that the cut's going to be exactly the same on both sides of the board. If we don't get these dados perfectly aligned on both sides of the joint, there's nothing that's going to fix this joint later. Another thing the gauge block lets me do is make small adjustments to my rib fence so we can sneak up on the right width of these cuts. This sneaking up on the right size business is something you get better at with some experience, so just go slow, make very small changes, and check your work often. I like the fit of these dados to be where I can drop the piece in, but it has no side-to-side play. That's perfect for me. I need to make a notch at the top of the board about 1/2 inch deep for the legs of the bridle to be flush with the bottom of the board when it's assembled. And I use the gauge block for those cuts as well. A nice easy feed rate gives you a good cut. We're not in a rush here. Now I've got my 50-tooth 10-inch blade in the saw and have to raise it up so the blade is even with the bottom of that notch. And that should be about 1/4 of an inch less than the full cutting height the saw is capable of. I never run it at the full height. That black thing in the lower right corner of the picture is the plug for the saw. I'm no dummy and I wouldn't be playing with the blade by hand if it wasn't there. If I didn't have this cast iron tenoning jig, there's no way I would be making these cuts. We absolutely have to have the kind of accuracy and safety this cast iron jig gives us. Reversing the piece between cuts ensures us that the bridle is going to be perfectly centered. I made a few more passes and 2 more small adjustments, and then we're ready to test fit this piece. I had to clean up one side of the notch just a little bit with a rasp, but otherwise this fits well. Because the bridle is a bit wider than the board it goes into, I like to put a gentle rounding on the edges. It just dresses it up a little bit. When you're satisfied with the fit and ready to assemble it, there's nothing special about putting glue on a bridle joint. You want to get a nice even coat on all of the surfaces. With the strength of today's glues, you really don't need to pin a joint like this, but I like putting dowels in anyway because it just makes it look better. Now we have it all sanded and ready to go, so I'm going to rub a little oil on it just so you can see the contrast. The end grain of the dowels darkens up nice and really catches the eye. Making bridle joints really isn't that tough. It gets a lot easier with some practice. But once you learn how to do it, this is a good skill to have to dress up your projects.